Before the maps were drawn in ink, they were drawn in song. Before the fences cut the horizon into squares, the land breathed as a single, living organism, vast and indivisible. I am that breath. I am the voice of the land. I hold the memory of the grass that bowed before the wind, the river that carved the canyon, and the blood that watered the roots of the cedar. I am the witness to the days when the sky was a blanket of infinite blue, unbroken by the smoke of factories, when the only thunder came from the clouds or the hooves of the great herds. Listen now, not with your ears, but with the marrow of your bones. Listen to the story of my children, the first peoples who did not own the earth, but belonged to it. We begin where the heart of the continent beats strongest, in the vast, rolling ocean of grass that the newcomers would one day call the Great Plains. But to the Lakota, the Dakota, and the Nakota, this was not a frontier. It was the center of the world. It was the place where the earth itself exhaled. In the beginning, there was darkness and the safety of the womb.
Deep beneath the surface of the Black Hills, the Pahasapa,
the heart of everything that is, the ancestors waited. They lived in the Tunken Teepee, the spirit lodge, hidden from the harshness of the sun and the biting cold. They waited for the earth to be ready, and when the time was right, when the grass was green and the water flowed sweet, the trickster spirit Iktomi beckoned them. They climbed through the passageway, the Onia Oshoka, the place where the earth breathes inside. You can still feel it today at Wind Cave, that rush of cool air, the respiration of the mother. They emerged, blinking into the light, led by Tokahe, the first man, but they were not alone. As they stepped onto the surface, they saw the hoofprints of a brother who had gone before them, a brother who would sustain them, clothe them, and house them until the end of days. The Tatanka, the relationship between the Lakota and the buffalo, was not one of hunter and prey. It was a communion of blood and spirit. To kill a buffalo was not a sport, it was a prayer. Imagine the scene. Painted in the golden light of late summer, the grass, waist-high and shimmering, stretches to the edge of the world. The air smells of sagebrush and heated dust. A vibration begins in the soles of your feet, a low hum that grows into a roar. They come, the Black River, millions of them. The bison, with their massive, shaggy heads low to the ground, a tide of muscle and horn that reshapes the landscape as it moves. For the Lakota warrior, riding bareback on a pony, painted with symbols of lightning and hail, the hunt was a dance with death. He did not shoot from a distance with a cold machine. He rode alongside the thundering beast, his leg brushing against the coarse fur, his life hanging on the sure-footedness of his horse and the grace of his aim. When the arrow flew, it was guided by respect. When the great bull fell, the silence that followed was heavy with gratitude. "Grandfather," the hunter would whisper, placing a pinch of tobacco on the muzzle of the fallen giant. "Forgive me. I take your life so that my people may live. Your spirit returns to the great mystery, and your body becomes our strength." Nothing was wasted. The skull became an altar, facing the setting sun, painted with red earth to symbolize the renewal of life. The hide became the teepee, the warm embrace that held the family through the blistering Dakota winters. The sinew became the bowstring. The paunch became the cooking pot. The tail became the fly brush. The tatanka was the walking library of the plains, teaching the people that generosity is the highest virtue. Just as the buffalo gave everything of itself for the tribe, so too must a leader give everything for his people. A chief was not the one with the most horses. He was the one who fed the poorest widow, who gave his last blanket to the shivering orphan. To hoard was to be less than human. To give was to be like the tatanka. This spiritual connection culminated in the sun dance. The Wiwanyang Wachipi, it was the time of renewal, when the scattered bands came together in a great circle. In the center stood the sacred cottonwood tree, cut down by a virgin and carried without touching the ground. It was the axis of the universe. The dancers, men who had vowed to sacrifice themselves for the healing of a relative or the safety of the people, stood around it. They did not offer gold or jewels to Wakantanka, the Great Spirit, for they owned nothing but their own bodies, and so they gave their flesh, Pierced through the chest with bone skewers attached to the tree by rawhide ropes, they danced. They danced until they were delirious with pain and thirst, staring into the sun, pulling back until the flesh tore free. This was not masochism. It was an act of profound love. They believed that by suffering, they could take upon themselves the hardships of the tribe, ensuring that the buffalo would return and the cycle of life would continue. But the wind that blows across the plains does not stop at the river. It carries the scent of the pine and the wood smoke further east, crossing the great father of waters, the Mississippi, and entering the deep, brooding woodlands of the Northeast. Here, the canopy is so thick that the sun touches the forest floor only in dappled pools. The air is heavy with moisture and the smell of decaying leaves and wet earth. This is the domain of the Haudenosaunee, the people of the Longhouse. If the Sioux were the masters of space, moving with the horizon, the Iroquois were the architects of order. But before the order, there was chaos. Long ago, before the white sails appeared on the salt water, the 5 nations, Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca, were drowning in blood. It was the time of the morning wars. Brother killed brother in an endless cycle of revenge. A death for a death, a scalp for a scalp. The rivers ran red, and the people lived in terror behind high palisades. The woods were full of ghosts. Into this darkness came a man in a canoe carved from white stone. He was the peacemaker. He brought a message from the Creator that war was an aberration, a sickness of the mind. He sought out Hiawatha, a man consumed by grief, whose wife and daughters had been murdered by the sorcerer Tadadaho. Hiawatha was wandering the forest, lost in madness, but the peacemaker healed his mind with words of condolence. Drying his tears with the soft skin of a fawn, together, they traveled from village to village, preaching the good mind, righteousness, health, and power. Their greatest challenge was Tadadaho, the Onondaga tyrant. He was twisted in body and mind, so full of hate that snakes grew from his hair, writhing and hissing. He was the embodiment of all the evil that men do to one another. But the peacemaker and Hiawatha did not kill him. They did not conquer him. They sang to him. They sang the hymn of peace until the snakes fell from his hair and his twisted limbs straightened. They combed the hate from his mind and made him the firekeeper of the new Confederacy. Thus was born the great law of peace, the Guyana Shagawa. It was a political masterpiece, centuries ahead of the monarchies of Europe. The peacemaker planted the tree of peace, the great white pine. Its needle clusters grew in groups of 5, symbolizing the 5 nations bound together. I bury your weapons of war beneath this tree. He told them, I cast them into the deep underground current of water, to be carried away forever. He took 1 arrow and broke it easily. Then he took 5 arrows, bound with sinew, and showed that they could not be broken. This was the strength of the League. But this strength did not rest on the shoulders of a king. It rested on the wisdom of the women in the Longhouse. Society was matrilineal. The lineage followed the mother. The children belonged to the mother's clan. The bear, the wolf, the turtle, the snipe. And it was the clan mothers, the Oyani, who held the true power. They were the keepers of the land and the food. A chief, Aroyane, could speak in the council, but he was chosen by the women. If he became arrogant, if he forgot the people, the clan mother would gently warn him. If he did not listen, she would warn him again. And if he still refused to serve the people, she would remove his antlers, the symbol of his office, and he would be a man of no standing. Imagine the Grand Council fire at Onondaga. 50 sachems sit in a circle, representing the nations. They do not shout. They do not interrupt. They listen. The Mohawks and Senecas, the elder brothers, debate an issue. They pass their decision across the fire to the younger brothers, the Oneidas and Cayugas. If they agree, the decision is passed to the Onondaga, the fire keepers. For confirmation, it is a slow process, a deliberate process. Requiring total consensus, it forced men to compromise, to see the world through the eyes of their enemies. It was a democracy of the woods, built on the understanding that no man has the right to rule another against his will. The Iroquois understood that freedom was not the ability to do whatever you wanted. It was the ability to live in balance with your community and the natural world. They lived in longhouses, great structures of elm bark and saplings, stretching up to 300 feet. Inside, a dozen families lived together, sharing fires, sharing food, sharing the responsibility of raising the next generation. There were no locks on the doors. There were no poorhouses. If one had food, all had food. If one starved, all starved. But the wind is shifting again. I feel a cold draft coming from the east. The Iroquois, in their wisdom, looked out from the top of the Tree of Peace, where the eagles sat watching. They saw the sails. They saw the bearded men who carried metal that flashed like the sun and diseases that burned like fire. They saw a people who did not understand the language of the forest, who looked at a tree and saw lumber, who looked at the beaver and saw a hat, who looked at the land and saw a commodity to be bought and sold. The Sioux on the high plains were still largely shielded by distance, following the buffalo under the open sky, their golden age reaching its zenith with the arrival of the horse, the holy dog that transformed them from plodding wanderers into the centaurs of the plains. They were becoming the lords of the grassland, expanding their territory, confident in the protection of Wakantanka. But in the east, the Haudenosaunee were already facing the storm. They tried to teach the newcomers the Great Law. They suggested that the 13 colonies of the white men should form a union like their own, a bundle of arrows that could not be broken. The white men listened, and they took the idea of the union, but they left behind the spirit of the clan mothers and the stewardship of the earth. The tragedy that was to come was not just a clash of armies, it was a clash of realities. On one side, a world where the land was the mother, sacred and indivisible. On the other, a world where the land was property, to be fenced, tilled, and owned. The Iroquois League, the great peace that had lasted for centuries, would be torn apart not by its own internal failings, but by the civil war of the white men, the American Revolution. The council fire would be covered. Brother would once again fight brother, forced to choose sides in a war that was not their own. And out on the plains, the iron rails were creeping closer, bringing with them the iron horse that ate the wood and scared the game. The buffalo hunters were packing their heavy rifles. The treaties were being written on paper that would fade, made by men whose promises were as shifting as the wind. But before the darkness falls completely, let us remember the light. Let us hold in our minds the image of the Lakota warrior, arms spread wide to the sun, a living prayer for his people. Let us hold the image of the Iroquois clan mother, standing tall in the doorway of the longhouse, the arbiter of peace and justice. They are the spirit of the North and East. They are the roots and the wings. They are the ancestors who still speak if you know how to listen to the wind in the pines and the rumble of the earth. Do you hear them? The drums are beginning to beat a different rhythm now, a faster, more urgent rhythm. The rhythm of hooves pounding against the dry earth of the southern plains. The rhythm of the Comanche,